Hello. Hi. So I was going to just start with the first slide that's going to say my name in the font that I like a lot. My name is Rachel Feinstein. I'm an artist. I have a show currently up right now at the Jewish Museum. It's called Maiden Mother Crone. It's closing very soon on March 22nd, so if anyone hasn't seen it, please go. I'm very proud of it. I went to Columbia University and I was a religion major. So the title of the show incorporates my thesis paper about Sleeping Beauty and about the different stages of women. And my art is about that as well. So I'll start with an image of my family. So I grew up in Miami, and a lot of people don't actually grow up in Miami. And my mother and my father were both very huge figures in my life, as many people's parents are, but they were polar opposites of each other. My mother was German-Irish Catholic, or is German-Irish Catholic, and my father Russian-Jewish from an Orthodox family in Brooklyn. And they met up at Syracuse in 1965. My father was the first Jew my mother ever laid eyes on. They fell in love at first sight. My mother baptized me Catholic, and then I went to Hebrew school, which is why I was a religion major. But I always wanted to be an artist, and my parents didn't want me to take art. For whatever reason, coming from where they came from, you actually couldn't have a career as an artist, but you could as a religion major. So that never made any sense either. And I was lucky enough to be in Miami at this really strange, amazing time where it was the 80s, and Miami was still this backwater place, but it had this burgeoning scene with fashion. And Bruce Weber came down and photographed the Obsession ads and took this picture of me when I was 14. And it was a vision into a whole world of people that were creative and professional artists. And all of a sudden I realized I can be an artist. And I made it my plan to get myself up to New York City. And this also was where I learned the difference between good art and bad art. This is another modeling picture of mine in the 80s. And I started to see high and low culture, all these different cues that became part of my work. This is hard to see in this image, but this is an installation inside my show of one of my pieces that I made for this specific spot in the museum. And it's an inlaid, layered wood. I make all my work myself in my studio down on Canal Street. And it's a scene of a Miami house, basically, very Scarface. And that's something that's something I think about a lot, is high and low. And this is another image of one of the pieces, three pieces based on religion in my show right now: Saint Sebastian, Saint Michael, and then this piece in the middle. It's called Model. And then this is another image of one of the pieces in the show, which are these mirror paintings of women that were based on Miss Havisham and Aunt Pitty-Pat and Gone with the Wind, and this process of time and decay and the stages of a woman's life. So my father was a dermatologist, and in a time when it was all about skin cancer and not about Botox. And he had these magazines lying around in my house that were called Cutis. And it was literally a real skin magazine. It was images of people in advanced stages of syphilis and skin cancer. It was a very hard thing to see as a young child. And I started to be very affected by this vision of really terrible skin problems mixed with the backdrop of Miami being this rotting jungle and all these bugs. The first time my husband came down to visit my family, he went to the bathroom and turned the lights on, and there were 1,000 ants then being eaten by 2 flying cockroaches, which were then being eaten by lizards. So it's like this crazy, weird thing of this. Miami is actually a rainforest, and it is built on a lot of landfill, and it has this just rotting kind of jungle stench to me. So I ended up finding an art, and also there's no culture. So I had this bubble of my idea of culture was Disney World, and that's what I thought Rococo really looked like, and Baroque. And so I started to look at art history for the first time at Columbia. This is a painting by Rachel Roish that was done in 1710, a female painter, and it's about nature mort. And the theme about nature mort is literally dead nature, but it's about the beauty of something that is perfect for that very moment, and then it will be gone. And how it's an analogy to all of our own lives, and not only to our own bodies and our own youth and our own flesh, but to life itself, to experiencing, enjoying this moment alive in the best way you can, because it will be gone. And I got really interested in that as an artist. So when I was a teenager, I would draw little bugs on my skin, and I liked this idea of somehow documenting my beautiful 18-year-old flesh with having this aspect of decay. And there was this drawing by Robert Hooke, that it was the man who actually developed the first microscope. He did this in 1666. And Dürer also had made beautiful drawings of bugs. And I really love the idea of getting this tattooed on my butt when I was 18. So it was the first thing I did when I moved up to New York City. And I didn't realize, though, that from 1961 to 1997, tattoos had been made illegal in New York City. And I was a freshman in 1989. So I had to find a tattoo artist, and I went up to the Bronx in 1989, all by myself as an 18-year-old girl on the subway, and found this man who had a private tattoo parlor in his apartment. And I paid him, I think, $50 to have this tattooed on my shoulder, because I was too afraid to pull down my pants alone with this guy. And it turns out that he didn't give me that tattoo. I turned around after he did this tattoo, and it was a rainbow-colored dragonfly. And I couldn't believe it. Here I was, an artist obsessed with every line, everything that mattered in my life, and I had something on my body for the rest of my life that I did not choose. So he said, "You will appreciate it later on because you're a pretty girl." So the story I'm telling you is this kind of metaphor of this. And so I was very upset. I went to the MoMA. I saw this beautiful sculpture by Salvador Dali, and I saw these ants that he had painted all over this woman's face. So I had the idea, I'm going to have ants killing the dragonfly. So I found a really good tattoo artist this time that was nice, and he was on 8th Street, and he gave me the ants. Then I was taking sculpture when I was at Columbia, and it was the third wave feminist era. Bell Hooks, Kiki Smith was making this sculpture, and she was my teacher. And I went to see this, and Judy Pfaff and Ursula von Rüdingsvard. I had 3 extremely strong, very powerful mentors when I was at school. And I remember when I first saw this piece called Tail, it just floored me. I couldn't believe that you could make something like this. It socked me in the stomach. I thought sculpture was Rodin. And so I decided I was going to be a sculptor. And so at the time, I got into doing body casts of my own work to look, because basically I was looking at Kiki's work. This is a piece I made when I was 20 at Columbia University. It's called The Ultimate Woman. It's a cast of my own body with all these kind of bullet hole orifices coming out. And I also made this one that's called Penis Flytrap. And it's a welded heavy piece that has blades in the back of it, and it's hung at about this level. And you can go in, but you can't come out. The blades are basically tilted so that you can't come back out. And so I was doing casts also of my vagina. And I was using dental mold material. I was putting it on my vagina before I went out for the night, and it would drip down, and so I would have a vagina and an anus that I would use as jewelry for the night. And it was this crazy, weird thing that people couldn't figure out what it was, because it was negative cast. So the vagina was on my neck, and the anus was a drop earring. And even Jerry Garcia, who I met at some party, was just completely freaked out by me, of all the people. So I decided to do a tattoo of my vagina cast. That was the last kind of hurrah of that whole cycle of all these different periods of my life. And my best friend's brother did the tattoo looking at the cast on his kitchen table in Sacramento. And it gets to the very end of my talk, which is now bringing all my art back to that very early work. I went on a journey of Rococo work and Baroque work and old masters, and then I went back to the woman and to thinking about this idea of what I started with and decay. And I looked at the Victoria's Secret runway shows and got this inspiration of making these life-size sculptures based on these crazy images, but they're these enormous women sculptures that look like basically they've been made with Play-Doh and with all these kind of fun, childlike materials, but they're pretty intense and they're very, they say a lot of things to a lot of different people. Some men ask me, why did you make them look like they're beat up? And I said, they're not. This is the way I see myself and how I see my own body with the reality of being a woman artist versus how a male artist sees me. And which is also a very interesting story because my husband happens to be an incredible painter. His name is John Curran, and he makes paintings of me. So there's a lot of double-sided things here about the muse versus the artist. This is another one that's of this woman where it's in butterfly costume, and that's her blowing this kiss. And then she's also in my big show, which I would love for you all to see. And then bring it back all full circle. The way that religion works is that instead of it being a line from start to end, it's a circle. Life is a circle. And so this is my son's drawing, which actually amazes me. He's 16 now. He made this when he was 12. And he loves bugs, and he draws bugs on his body. And so life is this wonderful gift. Thank you.